So I'm winding it up. Please join me in introducing Dean Joan Sawyer.
Thank you very much for the introduction. May I present from where I sit? I claim age and infirmity. but not infirmity of mind, as some would have you believe. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope there's some young people here as well, because I like to address my remarks to them more than anybody else. I listened very carefully to what fell from the three previous speakers. I agree entirely with what fell from Mr. Tynes. I agree with what fell from Mr. Glinton, but I'd make some additions, or I would say explanations from my point of view. And with regard to what Ms. MacDonald said, I regret to say that I must disagree with her whole entire take on the discipline underlying this exercise. The reason why I say that is because I don't do it lightly. I respect Ms. MacDonald's view and views and her right to her opinions. My difficulty is that I have no agenda, whether female equality or male equality. I have none. My only agenda throughout my life has been trying to do the best I can with what I have and to help as many people as I can along the way. Nothing more, nothing less. You see, I do not belong to this world. I was sent here for a job, like most of you are sent here for a mission. Because human beings are infinitely variable. Human beings are infinitely capable of great development. But when you suppress the natural urge for excellence, you create monsters. Unfortunately, Ms. MacDonald blamed the education system. I do not blame the education system. I blame those who control the education system. You see, I was born in 1940, just after the beginning of World War II. I know what it is about blackouts. I know about ships blowing up on Exuma. I know about soldiers and sailors losing their lives in war for justice for us. Because if Hitler had won, I wouldn't be here now. I'd be in a labor camp. So, the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights, I'm thoroughly familiar with. I'm also familiar with the European Convention on Human Rights, both of which came into our Constitution in 1963. Nobody bothers to tell you all these people, tell you all this, right? Mr. Glinton mentioned that we were not citizens of the Bahamas before 10th of July 1973. How many of you were aware of that? Put up your hands if you were. You were aware? Yes. Praise the Lord. Because the group I spoke to in Nassau, hardly anybody was aware of that. And the reason was very simple. We were a colony of Great Britain, and we were proud to call ourselves British subjects. And we honored Her Majesty. And you couldn't go in the Shirley Street Theatre or any theatre at the beginning of a film without standing at attention when the Queen, God Save the Queen, was being played. And we were proud of it. But we had, despite what you say about colonialism, we had that self-discipline. And we were taught not to go by what the majority said, but to go with what we critically thought of. We were not taught to pass exams. We were taught to be critical thinkers. And that is what I tried to be. So when I had this letter in my computer for at least, I think it's about 5 or 6 weeks, as soon as they talked about bringing this referendum on, which was supposed to come on, you remember, on the 6th of November 2014. You remember? And they postponed it. And I said, my God, I thought they had discovered some common sense when they postponed it. I thought they would cancel it. Because really and truly, it made absolutely no sense to me. For the simple reason that my entire service to the country was in the public sector. I never was in private practice. I was always either in public works, education, Attorney General's office, Central Bank, the Supreme Court, Court of Appeal. I have advised different governments on citizenship or naturalization even before 1973, because I was a higher executive officer in the Attorney General's office before I went to study law formally. And we did it under the British Nationality Act, on which the Bahamas Nationality Act is modeled. Britain doesn't have a written constitution. They manage very well to deal with their citizenship under the Nationality Act. We have a constitution which gives the Parliament the power to enact laws so that people can acquire citizenship who were not entitled to be registered or acquired it under the existing provisions of the Constitution. And the reason for that was very simple. Because up until the 10th of July 1973, the Parliament of the Bahamas had no power to confer citizenship on anybody. Only the British government could. Is that clear to everybody now? Ms. MacDonald says that Article 13 really can't do what it is contended that it does. I'll read it again, because I seem to be the only person who seems to understand this thing. She says that Article 2 says it's the supreme law, and that any law is inconsistent therewith is void. Of course, that's what it says. But Article 2, after Article 52 says, subject to the provisions of the Constitution, Parliament may make laws for the peace, order, and good government of the Bahamas. Now tell me, who is going to complain if the Parliament of the Bahamas enacted a Bahamas Nationality Act that gave citizenship to all those children of Bahamian mothers born abroad who did not get the right to register before 1973? Who's going to complain? You? Because you know what they say. I show my daughter child is her child. I'm Bahamian. I understand the nuances of the language. The point is, in my experience, women with their children born abroad have brought their children here, and within 3 months, those children have been made citizens of the Bahamas. I can tell you the name of the case. Oh, you know the case? There were 4 people named Brian like this. Don't play with me. I've been here before, man. I've been here before, man. I'm talking what I know. I'm not talking what somebody told me or what my training elsewhere influences my mind. When I went to study law, I was already 29 years of age. I had a husband, a son, and a mortgage. Okay? So whatever happened in England and wherever else doesn't influence what my take on my country and on the laws. I try to look at the laws as they affect my country and my people. And that includes every visitor to this country, every person who invests in this country, every person who is in this country. Because unlike my friend, Miss MacDonald, we go a long way back. I'm 12 years a senior in age, at least. Well, like I tell them, let's get you on, we'll play a game. The point is that you can do a lot of things with language, but the one thing you can't do is change facts. And the fact is that since 1973, the Bahamas government, Parliament, I should say, had the power, and indeed did exercise the power to enact the Bahamas Nationality Act. 1973. It came into force on the same day as the Constitution. And they have been giving citizenship left, right, and center to whomever they wish, whenever they wish, and however they wish. Do not forget the situation in 2007 where a particular foreign minister gave 2,000 citizenship and there was a rumor that some of the people couldn't speak English. If you could do it for people who have no connection with the Bahamas, why can't you do it for the children of Bahamian mothers married to foreign men? That is why I said it required a change of heart, not of paper. You have to change people's heart and stop them from being so wicked. Because what they do is if they don't like you or don't like what you represent, they hold you hostage when you put in for make your rightful application for citizenship. And tell them sue me. You see, I do not practice telling lies. My memory don't go that good. I gotta tell the truth because I can't remember what to say. You see? But when you practice telling lies, they catch up with you. I spoke to a member of the commission on the 30th of April, and I said to that member, why didn't you tell the people of this country about the Bahamas Nationality Act in your education system, in your education, going down the island, spending our money left, right, and center, carrying an entourage, and you ain't never once mentioned Nationality Act? And she said, oh, you mean Section 6? I said, no, the whole act, the fact that it was passed. And Article 13. Why didn't you tell them? Because if you don't tell people what is there, how are they to make a considered decision? It's an insult to the intelligence of Bahamian voters. And the whole exercise of brainwashing the Bahamian people apparently came to a punch when poor Joan Sawyer, in her room, wondering whether she should send this letter or not, had it for 6 weeks, wouldn't send it, said to the Lord, Lord, if you want me to say anything in this, please give me an indication. And the phone rang immediately. And it was the Nassau Guardian. And I'm wondering how they get my number, which is unlisted. And they call a certain reporter's name, who I know, who happens to be a relative of my husband. And so because they called his name, I answered. And as I answered, I tried to answer truthfully. She said, do you mind if I ask you if you're going to vote in the upcoming referendum? And I said, no, I don't mind. She said, are you going to vote? And I said, yes. I said, God willing. And she said, how are you going to vote? I said, I'm going to vote no. And she said, have you read the bills? I said, no. She said, why would you say you're going to vote no and you haven't read the bills? I said, because it doesn't matter what the bills say. This vote referendum is totally unnecessary. The Parliament has the power now to correct all the wrongs that have been perpetrated against persons who are entitled or should be entitled. And if the Nationality Act is not sufficient, they can always amend it. It doesn't take long to do that. And there are many precedents throughout the British Commonwealth of Nations to do that. That is the reason why I wasn't even troubling, because in the first place, when I tried to write this, I couldn't find a copy of the bills anywhere. They weren't online, they weren't at government publications, they weren't published in the newspaper, they weren't anywhere. So you Bahamian people were being asked to vote on bills that you had never seen. And in language that is at least confusing, even to the educated in the law. I found that really appalling. I was really disturbed that in 2016, a country that prides itself on what it calls its Christian values and so on and so forth should be brainwashing the Bahamian public about what it wants. Their whole approach was that of Hitler in 1935, leading up to his taking power in Germany. Tell them say yes, 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 tell them this is what the bill says, whether the bill says it or not. How many of you in here cannot read English? The Constitution is written in English, plain English. It doesn't have too much legalese in it. Even me can understand it. You know, and I really find it amazing that in 2016 people would be saying that the Constitution can do something it cannot do. I put in my letter to the paper Mr. Darcy Ryan's case and Tamara Mercer's case. Those two cases are there for two reasons. Mr. Darcy Ryan was one of those people who, under the Constitution, had the right to apply to be registered because he was a belonger from Canada, Commonwealth citizen. He was actually able to vote here before 1973. And when he applied to be registered as a citizen, he was told no. No reasons were given him, and he was not heard on the matters that were concerning anybody. And of course, you know who was sent out to do the donkey work? Yours truly. And did I get my face wiped in the mud by the judges? I did my best. But I had a difficulty because I did not understand why the government of the day did not give him a citizenship. And I kept asking those who were instructing me, why didn't you give him citizenship? Oh, why didn't you give him citizenship? What? Eventually, I think it was 1980 or thereabouts. 1980. He brought a second action. In the first action, the Privy Council said in their judgment that he was entitled to be heard before they refused him his application for registration. In 1980, he brought an application to the Supreme Court for him to be registered, for the minister to be told to register him. Unfortunately, the judge made a mistake. He made the decision during Christmas time, and of course there are too many holidays, so his order was set aside on the technicality. And when Mr. Ryan, I understand, was in fact given the questions for him to answer, they were really questions concerning his exercise of his freedom of speech and association, which was guaranteed him by the Constitution since 1963. 63 Constitution, please. Come forward. I live these. And like I say, please, don't play with me. Because I don't have time to play. This is serious business. I'll get you all to laugh because to take off some of the weight, but I want you to understand how serious it is when people in positions of power would do this to an entire population. For what reason? For what reason? Miss MacDonald said, as one of her colleagues in Nassau said, well, you know, we signed on to CEDAW in 1993, and we signed on to the United Nations Convention. Well, that was part of our law from 1963, if not before, because we were a colony, and Britain was part of it. You know, when you don't understand history, you don't understand where you are, and you don't know where you're going. You see? In 1973, there was nothing new about the human rights provisions. They were there all along. They were there from 1963, including Article 26. The one that wouldn't have been there, the ones that wouldn't have been there, the ones on citizenship, because as I said, we had no power to give citizenship. And those ones that went in there, the British insisted on most of them being there because they wanted to safeguard the people who were under their protection in this country. Because we were all British subjects. And they wanted to make sure that we weren't illegally deprived of our citizenship. I'm thinking of a proper way to say rather than what came to my mind. In addition, once we got Article 13, Parliament, as I said, enacted the Nationality Act. And that act provides for citizenship on adoption. It provides for registration of Commonwealth citizens and British protected persons. Registration of minors. Section 6. Is a child born to a woman outside the Bahamas not a minor? You see, I say this because I would have written opinions and opinions and opinions when I was in the Attorney General's office on the application of these provisions. And my training is that you give that interpretation which gives justice, especially to those who cannot fend for themselves, especially children. Okay? I really am a little bit perturbed at the seriousness with some people attack other people who have different opinions on this matter. Because that in itself is an indication of prejudice. And prejudice is the opposite, offense. You know, Ms. MacDonald in her address you said, if Article 26 will require a person to have protection of the law, then what Ms. MacDonald says, what I said is, Article 26 requires every person to have protection of the law. Then what Ms. MacDonald said about Bahamians first begs the question of affording different treatment to different persons based on their national origin. The very thing she's claiming is wrong. Yes, no, that's what you said. No. Javi is saying, Javi is saying the two foreigners, right? You can hear it now? Oh, my time is up.
We were saying we have what she said on camera.
Okay. You see, one must be very careful when one comes to dealing with what is called the fundamental law of a country. And as Mr. Glinton and Mr. Tynes have pointed out, to create a referendum for the purposes for which it was intended in this particular exercise is really a colossal waste of time, money, and energy. In addition, it was a disservice to the entire Bahamian population. For one, they did not give people copies of the bills. And as I described on an earlier occasion, it was like Caligula in ancient Rome, writing laws in tiny letters and hanging them up high so that the populace couldn't see it, and then claiming that they were published. And this is what they did. They printed these bills, but nobody could get a copy of it. On the day when I was able to get a copy, let me tell you how I got it, so you would know that I'm a serious person. I called around every agency that I thought might have had one. No one had one. I called government publications as a last resort. They told me I have to get it from the House of Assembly. Well, Joan Sawyer, as a judge, never went to the House of Assembly except on a state occasion to view a dead body. I stayed away from that place. I have no ambitions in that place. And I sent my grandson to the House of Assembly to collect the copy for me. When he came back to the car, I said, "Why did you take so long?" He said, "Mommy, they had one copy and I had to wait while she photocopied it." I hope he's telling me the truth. Is that how you do serious business of referendum? In addition, if you look at these bills themselves, each one of them, if I'm not mistaken, purports to repeal an existing provision of the Constitution. If you want to add additional rights, just put in an addition. Why repeal the existing provision? Do you know what the parameters, the permutations of that is? Do you know how far that will go? Do you know who is affected or will be affected? You God? You suddenly know everything? When you're dealing with human beings, try to be reasonable and try to remember that other people have common sense too. And stop insulting their intelligence. I could go on and on, but boy, it's really rough. I told you I would read Article 13 for you, right? Article 13 reads, and you could tell me if I'm crazy. Parliament may make provision, A, for the acquisition of citizenship. Pausing there, Ms. MacDonald said that if Parliament made a law that was inconsistent with Articles 3 to 10, then that law would be ultra-virus. What? I didn't just read what I just read then. Because if the Constitution itself enables Parliament to make a law for the acquisition of citizenship by persons who did not get it before. How could that be unconstitutional? In what court could that be said? In what person with common sense and common grasp of the English language could that be said? Acquisition means to acquire, to get hold of, to apply for. So, if Parliament can make it on the 13th, why do we need to amend the Constitution again, please? Please somebody tell me, because I definitely be at sea. It has been posited to some of my colleagues and to me that, you know, putting it in the Constitution will make it stronger. I just mentioned Darcy Ryan to you. But Darcy Ryan was not registered as a citizen until after 1992 general election. What does that tell you? From 1974, he was entitled. Now, whether you like Mr. Ryan or not, whether you agree with him or not, that's not the issue. The issue is fairness and justice for all. Not for some, because of what color they wear, what shape they wear, how they vote, where they come from. And in addition to which, I have a real heavy burden on my heart for those children, particularly, forgive me if I say it, of Haitian nationals born in this country after the 10th of July, 1973. I would like, for my comfort, if nobody wants to say it, I'll say it. I would like to know, for my comfort, that those children who are young men and probably middle-aged men and women now, some of them, have received their registration as citizens of the Bahamas. Because they had 1 year from attaining the age of 18 to do it. But there was nothing to prevent the government, under Section 6 of the Nationality Act, from giving it to them as minors. Nothing. Come, let us reason together. Though your sins be as scarlet, they'll be white as wool. But you gotta first confess them, right? Deal with them. But Mr. McDonald said we could leave them till we finish dealing with this gender equality thing. I'm coming to that right now. Ms. McDonald and I worked in the Attorney General's office together for some time. And we've been together on different occasions. We attended courses together and stuff like that. At least one, I think, banking management course. My difficulty is her interpretation of Article 26. I saw that in an article written by the Archbishop of the retired Archbishop of the Anglican Communion, who is not a lawyer, as far as I'm aware. Article 26, I call it's a protection from discrimination on the grounds. It protects every person in the Bahamas, whether you're male, female, LGBT, child, old, young, greenhorn, mentally retarded. It protects every person in the Bahamas from unlawful intrusions by the government and its agencies. So when the government goes and takes somebody's land because they're not Bahamian, or takes their business because they're not Bahamian, that is a no. It can't be done legally under the Constitution. And they have been doing it to Bahamians as well. And they must pay compensation if they acquire it under the Acquisition of Land Act. And that's in the Constitution too. You see? The thing goes with sense. Article 26, as they read, says, subject to provisions of 4, 5, and 9 of this article, no law shall make any provision which is discriminatory either of itself or in its effect. Now, to me, there are some things that are necessary to be discriminatory. One of them is my gender. I'm sorry, I can't use a male bathroom. And I don't want a male nurse bathing me if I'm in hospital. And I don't want a male policeman searching me if I'm arrested. Hence the case of Tamara Merson. Tamara Merson was a young woman come to the Bahamas as a visitor. She's arrested by the police on no evidence at all, no reasonable grounds for arrest. As a tort, breach of her constitutional rights, and all kinds of things mixed up there. But they didn't leave it there, you know. They took her and put her in a cell, but I think I may be wrong. Correct me, Mr. Tynes, if you remember. Is 11, not 13? It was 11 men. No bathroom facilities for her. No female officer ever touched her. No female officer was ever present at her arrest. And she was left in there for some hours, if I'm not mistaken. They laughed at me when I awarded her damages for breach of her constitutional rights and for false arrest and false imprisonment and malicious prosecution and all those things. I awarded her more than $250,000 plus interest. To send the message, to send the strong message that you do not interfere with people's rights based on where they're from. You treat them like human beings. If you treat them like human beings, you will not have to tread that road again. You never know when you will have to, or your children will have to run and be a stranger in somebody else's country. So treat people fairly, then you don't have to worry about what happens down the road. And I do not like, I hate when people in power oppress those who have no power. I hate it. And God hates it. You cannot continue to do that wickedness and expect a country to progress. You cannot. But to go on, Article 26(2) says, subject to provisions of paragraph 6, 9, and 10 of this article, no person shall be treated, as Mr. Clinton pointed out, in a discriminatory manner by any person acting by virtue of any written law or in the performance of the functions of any public office or public authority. Hence my appall at what the police did to Miss Merson. You're not supposed to do that. And Article 3 says discriminatory means you can't treat them differently based on their race, place of origin, political opinions, color or creed. Race, place of origin, which Mr. McDonald says we can, to him first. Alright? And then deal with them afterwards, right? Or any public authority. Well, you know, there was a gentleman who, I'm going to digress for a minute, a gentleman who said some years ago, Bahamians don't commit those sets of crimes, those kinds of crimes. It was where tourists had been beaten, raped and beaten and buried under some rocks on Paradise Island. And I said, where did he live? There is no wickedness that Bahamians cannot commit. Equally, there is no goodness Bahamians are not capable of committing if they put their minds to it. But I will swear for I won't swear for my child out of my sight, let alone Bahamians generally. And we go on to Article 26(4). Ms. MacDonald reads it quite differently from me, and from the way it was read even by the government of the day in 2013. I'll get to that in a minute. Paragraph 1 of this article shall not apply to any law so far as that law makes provision for the appropriation of revenues or other funds of the Bahamas, or for the imposition of taxation, including the levying of fees for the grant of licenses. Now, you know, they give licenses to casinos, right, to foreign people. They don't give it to you all. Okay? That's a discrimination, right? And so paragraph 1 does not apply to that. You see what I mean? It's not forbidden. It's not forbidden. And then B, with respect to the entry into or exclusion from or the employment, engaging in any business or profession, movement or residence within the Bahamas of persons who are not citizens of the Bahamas. Well, a foreigner can't come here and say, I have a right to come in, can he? Border Patrol. If I want to go into the United States, I have to go through Border Patrol. That's the right of every country to guard its borders. That's common sense. So you can't discriminate on the basis of race, national origin, because some people may have come from a place where there is Ebola. You want the Ebola virus in your country if you could prevent it. You know, these are things of common sense. And then it says, now this is the part that really bothers me when I hear what they talk about marriage and so on and so on. And they said, you can't have same-sex marriage. Mr. Tynes highlighted the provision in the bill. Was it 2. Which could very well end up with that same scenario, right? You can't, Parliament, in other words, Article 1 does not apply with respect to adoption, marriage, divorce, burial, devolution of property on death, or other matters of personal law. I pointed out on another occasion that we have Muslims in our country, Jews, Hindus, we have other religions in this country besides Christianity. And they're entitled to observe their rights with regard to marriage. So when the Marriage Act or the Matrimonial Causes Act or the Adoption Act or the Burial Act says something and it just seems to discriminate against them, Article 26(4)(c) says they cannot sue the government for breach of their constitutional rights. Because that's a matter of personal law. And if you think I'm joking about that, Ms. MacDonald mentioned how what is the one you said they did? That they did to their credit, they did something? Was it devolution of property on death?
For the inheritance.
The Inheritance Act. Well, the Inheritance Act is in that same provision. Did anybody have a referendum in 2000 when the Inheritance Act was changed? Did anybody have a referendum when the Divorce Act was changed? 83? You remember the man who tried to bury his wife in the property, and there were complaints? Yes. And they were trying to prosecute him for something. They had to desist, didn't they? Wasn't it? That's a burial. That's a personal law. So this is why I would have said to Mr. Fred Smith some years ago, apparently we were having a discussion in my office after he would have finished the case. The law already allows the government, if it wishes, the Parliament, to enact legislation to permit same-sex marriages, if they wish. Do it, if you wish. Do it. And you see, the reason why I'm telling you this is I'm going to bring up one last point on that particular thing, but I also can mention the other provisions in Article 26. Paragraph E, 4E says, for authorizing the granting of licenses or certificates permitting the conduct of a lottery, the keeping of a gaming house, or the carrying on of gambling in any of its forms, subject to conditions which impose upon persons who are citizens of the Bahamas disabilities or restrictions to which other persons are not made subject. And in 2013, the government, in its wisdom, had a referendum, which we are now being told was not a referendum because the Prime Minister didn't say that it was binding. Well, whoop-dee-doo! When did the Prime Minister get the authority of the courts to say what is binding and what is not in law? We are confused. We are a confused nation. We do not seem to know where to draw the lines. The demarcation between the judiciary and the executive and the legislature must be much clearer than that. And that's not a subject of referendum. Yeah, take care. You'll hear me anyway on the... The point is that the government then proceeded, after the majority of persons who did bother to vote in the referendum in 2013 said no. Didn't they go ahead and give the licenses? Yes. And at that time, I was aware of that. I had called a pastor, Bishop Simeon Hall, before when he was having his town meeting, and I drew his attention to the same provision. And when I finished reading out to him, he said to me, "What is the referendum about, sir?" About? I said, "You tell me, sir." Because I can't tell him how to vote. But he got the point. He came out, said he was going to say no, and then he campaigned for the yes campaign. And they lost. You see, God make ugly the Bahamians say, but he don't like ugly ways. We must stop pretending to be what we are not. Let's be truthful people. Let's be honest people. Let's tell people the truth. Try to do it more gently than I sometimes do, but tell it anyhow. Because the only way we're going to grow is if we begin speaking truth to each other. And to go on with Article 26, In 5 it says, nothing contained in any law should be held to be inconsistent with or in contravention of paragraph 1 of the article to the extent that it makes provision with respect to standards or qualifications, not being a standard or qualification specifically relating to race, place of origin, political opinions, color, or creed, in order to be eligible for service as a public officer or as a member of a disciplined force or for the service of a local government authority or body corporate established by law for public purposes. And it goes on. Paragraph 6 has a similar one. Paragraph 7 has a similar one. Paragraph 8 has one. Paragraph 10, paragraph 8 in particular, is you cannot discriminate in your conveyances. Because you know, before 1963, black people can live in Cable Beach. You can buy land in Cable Beach. Okay? That was part of the conveyance. That was a condition in the conveyance. You see, all these things have been here, and people are not telling you these, but they're telling you, let's change the Constitution. We have to have gender equality because women need to be equal to men. I am sorry, I do not subscribe to that. I have never subscribed to that. I do not follow the American views on women's liberation. I think it is a nonsensical idea. It does not follow, it does not make any sense at all. Because I start from the base that I was born in a country which subscribed to Christian values. And in Christianity, there's neither male nor female, Jew nor Greek. You're all one in Christ. I have a difficulty with trying to see that I want to be treated the same as a man. I do not wish that for me or any of my sisters. I would, if I had the will and I had the money, I would make every one of my nieces who have children stay home with their babies until those children were in school, and then they would only work while the children are in school. And I would have less crime problem. I would have a less crime problem. But we sacrifice our children's future to follow some ideology that came from nowhere and is ending up nowhere. The whole world, as Mr. Christie pointed out last October, says we must get on board with the LGBT agenda because Mr. Joe Biden, the Vice President of the United States, has threatened to sort of put us on a blacklist if we don't. Now, Mr. Joe Biden, I understand, is a Roman Catholic. I don't know if he's practicing, but I think the Roman Catholic Church has exactly the opposite position with regard to that matter. But in addition to that, who was Mr. Joe Biden to tell the Bahamas anything when I can't remember the year, but it was before we got independence. The United States of America dumped, I don't know, remember how many barrels of nerve gas in our waters off of Abaco, and they're still there. 62 barrels, I believe, or something like that. It's 1962, the same year I got married. Tell me people, why should we listen to anything they say? Do they have our best interests at heart? So did Mr. Vice President Dick Cheney when he found out his daughter was, first he was saying he's all for marriage between man and woman only. When he found his daughter was a lesbian, he says, oh no, but they have a right. Then the black man, who's the first black governor of Virginia, he died in New York a couple of months ago. He gets on and he says, oh yes, that's a human right. What? There's never a human right to do wrong. There's never a human right to do wrong. Your human rights are guaranteed that the government will not do you wrong. But you see, if you move the base, if you move the foundation, then nonsense comes in. I don't know if that make any sense to you. But I could go on and on about this, but I think I'm boring you all to tears. You're not? I don't know that I can say it. I think I prefer to leave it to questions because I don't know what you're thinking. I hope I've stirred your interest enough to have you read the Constitution if you can get a hold of a copy. They're $15 from government publications. No, I'm not pushing them. I'm just telling you, arm yourself with it. Keep it for future reference and for your children. And insist that the Constitution and constitutional law be taught at least from high school level.